Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome, listeners from America and across the world. I'm your host, Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. And as always, we thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. I'm very honored to have as guests with me for the next 2 hours my good friend, Dr. Joye Pugh. Dr. Joye, are you there?
Yes.
Well, it's been a long time coming. I know we've been wanting to get together and do a follow-up on the, all the number of shows that we've done together, but situations and circumstances have not allowed us to do so. I'm honored to have you here and joining me this evening. So if you would, Dr. Joye, just give people where they can go to find your website, your books, your work, your contact information, Facebook, anything of that nature.
Within my Facebook is just listed under Joye Pugh, P-U-G-H, and my website is www.drjoye.com. And, of course, my books and things are available on Amazon, but the biggest thing that they're available is with your publication of sacredwordpublishers.com. And I've been trying to send most people there because you have all the updated versions where some of the older versions are still trying to be sold on Amazon for quite an expensive little tab. And I do wish that I could say that I would get a little bit of money off of any of those that they're selling for $1,000. It would be really nice, but of course, as most people know, our publisher at that time had some severe problems and is no longer in business. So anything that was out in distribution becomes the, I guess, sole ownership of whoever owns the book. I get a lot of questions about that through email as to why I'm selling my books at $1,000 a piece.
Right.
But of course, those I guess will become collector's items because they're no longer available.
Yes.
But the fact that we have gone back now and we have redone most of the books into 2017 updated editions, and then the Eden book will be a 2018 updated edition that we'll be talking about tonight. It's kind of been a long haul from all the things that have happened to try to get things back into some normalcy, I guess as much as it can be, because last year was quite devastating with the loss of my publisher and my work and my music, and then of course the severe sickness that Mill continued to get sicker as time went on, and then of course of his passing. All of that kind of in the last, I guess, 2 years. I believe that probably the last show that I did was a live show, and he had gotten so sick that I was not able to be on the radio with him as sick as he was, because it required 24/7 of my total attention in the same room with him. And so it's kind of bittersweet tonight when I went to put on my little earphones, which I haven't had on in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of shed a little bit of a tear, because the last time I had him on, in this little room, he was in the other room, and of course I would have a baby monitor on him and a way to watch him while I was actually doing my radio shows. And like I say, it just became so serious, his condition became so serious that I was telling a good friend that the last show that I had, the feeding tube had come loose, and he had gone to the bathroom, and I was trying to lift him and keep a phone next to my head, answering questions, and try to get him into the bathroom and handle his, actually sat by his side, that is familiar with ALS. Mel had a condition that was much similar to that because the muscles continued to quit working. He had a chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy that, of course, some of the listeners will know came from a flu shot that Mel took back in December of 2008. And he slowly, became disabled and more disabled until before he died, he had a tracheotomy, and he was not able to to go to the bathroom, and so I had to, his inability to cough. There was a lot of suctioning that had to be done to the tracheotomy. And then he was on full-time oxygen as well. So my house was kind of set up like a small ICU unit, and I was the the sole caregiver 24/7. And I'm thankful that God allowed me to have the capability to do that and to look after him. So, like I say, tonight was a little bit bittersweet to put on these little earphones and remember back the last time that I had them on.
Yes.
I don't really want to cry, but put these earphones on, and I had done it so many times over the course of his sickness. And, of course, he would try to listen to the shows from the other room. And it always seemed like when I would get off my shows, he always had something very positive to say about. And so I'm thankful that God gave us 9.5 years after the flu shot, because so many people who take the flu shot and get Gilliam-barre syndrome have not been able really to open your eyes or to communicate or do anything of that nature. So I know that there is a heaven, and
Yes.
And through the research that I've done, there's no way that there's not a God, because many times in all the sickness that Mel went through and all the tragicness that we had to encounter, there were many times that I really called out to God when there was nothing else. There was no other way, and God came through. And there was no one or nobody or no human could have made the things happen that did happen and that I saw. So I feel like that God has taught me a lot. It gave me understanding about things I never dreamed about that go on in this world, and how our world is changing, community as well as
Yes.
and our understanding for what it is for people to suffer and to need assistance and have a caring, compassionate attitude. And you find less and less Christians are out there that years ago, when I was a young child, coming up in the world, that you just had that support system because everybody that you knew were Christians, and everybody was compassionate, and everybody was concerned, and everybody was professional, and you just did not run into the thing. Or doctors that, take their oath to give healing and then don't really care if you live or die, as well as, the nurses and things of that nature. And that was a real shock. But at the same time, Zen, you and I have been trying to, over the years, tell people that we are living at the end of days.
Yes.
And I can honestly say, from what I had to deal with, me beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we are. It's almost like, you're in the way, move out of the way, give up. And it's more like a Dr. Kevorkian outlook on people.
Right.
And especially if you get a certain age, they don't care whether you really live. And I hate to say it, but at the same time, I guess, I've always talked about things in my life so that people would really understand that I'm speaking from experience and not reading it in a book. So many of the things that I have researched over the years that you and I have talked about many times on shows together, I've actually experienced, or either had someone close to me experience, or have really had case studies where I dealt with people directly who had certain. God allows you to go through things. It lets you see it, feel it, know it, and then when you have to stand and tell about it. And my hope is that people will listen. Have things happen in our life that we are very tragic, and this was a very tragic thing to have happened to a man who was a great, good, wonderful husband who worked all of his life, who was very dedicated to his work and to really helping other people. He was kind, he was compassionate, and just taking just a mere flu shot at the directive of, a doctor that he trusted, that he believed in. Bodies just don't handle it well. And then when you end up being the case that they don't want anybody to know about, then they want to push you aside and keep you kind of hidden, or give you something to kind of get you out of the picture so that you don't live long enough to tell other people about it. And I pray that God will always give me the opportunity to tell people, because you're not being told the whole truth, children or for adults. A good example was even that Mel had taken a pneumonia shot, and then he got pneumonia all the time. And I'm like, well, he had a pneumonia shot, and then you find out, oh, well, there's only like it covers one strand. Well, nobody ever said that. They said this is a pneumonia shot, and it keeps you from having pneumonia. And, of course, the flu shot, we all know, the flu shot can sometimes be effective against a strand. And like this past year, I think there was 2 different strands. And, I had people and friends that unfortunately did take flu shots, and then they came down with the flu and were very sick. So there's a lot of could be completely healthy, like Mill really was, to work all your life and hope to retire. And his goal was to play golf. He was a wonderful, wonderful athlete. Oh my gosh, he was such a good athlete, and he always wanted to retire and to play golf. And so he ended up watching golf when something so uncalled for was put in his body, and he had never ever had the flu, and I think he had the flu shot one time in his entire life. And I tried desperately that day to get him to come on, because I had a very severe reaction when I was in college to a flu shot, and he said I would never take another one because I was so sick. I have never been that sick. And I almost lost a quarter of school because of it in college. And so I tried to get him to leave, but the doctor got up and, he came after Mill after I got Mill to the door that day back in December 2008, and he said, it's my recommendation is your doctor, Mr. Pugh, that you need to take this flu shot. And I said, come on, Mel, come on, you don't have the flu, let's get out, da-da-da. So I was trying to get him out the door. Great, whole 9 yards. And so I got him kind of out the door, and the doctor came at him again with his finger. It's my recommendation. Mel had rheumatoid arthritis, and he says, because you have, immune system problem, it's my recommendation that you get this flu shot. And he just kind of stayed after him. So, Mel trusted him. He said, okay, well, and I was like, I didn't want him to do it. And he said, well, Joy, he's the doctor. So I cowed down and said, okay, even though I wasn't happy about it. And by the time we were going to Albany, it's a town about an hour and a half from where we were when he got the shot, he was already showing signs of something being wrong. And then as it progressed, he started dropping things, and then he started falling, and then he became frozen in place. And, of course, when we presented to the hospital in our town, because this doctor that was his rheumatologist was in another town, the doctors in our town didn't know what was going on and couldn't figure out. And, of course, everything was normal and all his blood work and stuff, and he'd been fine. He hadn't been sick. And so they tried to just save his life. And then from that point on, we traveled extensively to doctors everywhere trying to find out what was wrong. And if they had known and had an understanding about GBS, but I think in our town, one of the doctors said they had only seen GBS one time in their entire life, so it was just over their head. Nobody was thinking about what it could be. And so we went almost 3.5 years of me trying to rehabilitate Mill myself and trying to find a doctor to tell us what was wrong. And then finally we found a doctor that did say, well, what did the spinal tap show when Mr. Pugh presented to the hospital, and he could not move or walk. And I was like, nobody ever told us that he needed a spinal tap. And he said they should have done that because he wasn't, he was playing golf. He was perfectly okay.
Right.
So they sent us down to have the spinal tap to have it done, and then they called us the next morning and said, get back down here. The spinal fluid is full of active and chronic inflammatory demyelinating proteins. So it was literally stripping the myelin sheath off of all the nerves. And so, he'd gone 3.5 years of it just consistently getting worse and worse with no treatment, not knowing what was wrong. In fact, we had a doctor that was an orthopedic surgeon say that it had something to do with his spinal column, and they did surgery on my husband from C3 to C7 in the neck. They filleted his neck and the back of his neck open, took out the bones, because they believed that was why he wasn't starting, in other words, that was causing him to fall and not walk right. So he did not need at the hands of doctors that were not cognizant of what was really wrong with him. And then, like I say, when this neurologist, when he first did the ENGs on Mel's legs and stuff, I will never forget him sitting at the end of the bed, and I'm sitting there watching him. And when he would touch the needle to the nerves on the screen, it would just go. It wouldn't like run like an arrow runs. It was just all over the screen. And he says, "My gracious," he says, "I've never seen anything like this." And he said, "I don't even know that they may have a name to tell you what he's got. I've just never seen anything like it." And so that's why he sent us for the spinal tap. And then when they found out what it was, my grandmother, and kept just records of when something wasn't right, because I worked for years and years with handicapped people, and so if I ever noted any change in one of my clients, I always took notes on it. And so I had started taking notes the day that he had the flu shot, because I just knew something wasn't right.
Uh-huh.
And like I say, when we went down there, then of course with my notes that I presented to this doctor for over the 3 years of what had been going on, and the doctors we had seen, and the all these different people giving us all kind of diagnoses, it was tragic. It became really tragic when I knew more about it than they did, and that got scary. Because I was trying to figure out what in the world's wrong with my husband. I dealt with handicapped people for, almost 13, 14 years in my undergraduate work, that kind of stuff, special ed and adaptive physical education. I knew that there was something neurologically that was not firing correctly, because he was almost like, when he first started, if you have a vacuum cleaner and you've got it, let's say a cut in the cord, and it'll go, when it kind of catches and whatever. Well, Mel would want to start to walk, and what would happen is, from his brain to his feet, it would be firing to take a step, and what would happen is he'd think in his mind, "I'm going to take the step," but it hadn't got to his foot yet, and then he would start falling, and then all of a sudden his feet would just take off. He couldn't.
Oh, wow.
It was break, and then he would fall, and it was just, it got to the point that he couldn't walk, and then he got in the scooter, and at the same time it bowed the vocal folds, and so all the food he ate went into his lungs, and he began having, aspiration pneumonia, just one right after the other, and that's what led to the feeding tube. And he had to feed, like, we'd start at 8 o'clock at night. Most of the times when I did radio shows, I would start his feeding, to run, and then I could get to the radio show, and then it would run all night until the next morning around 11 o'clock. As long as he didn't have to have oxygen, we were still able to go, and I would put these feeding tubes and stuff in the car, and hang the bags and stuff, so we could travel. It became an issue, and then when he became bedridden, the only way that I could transport him was through an ambulance service. And there was a great little ambulance guy, and I'd like to give him a plug. His name was John Keenan, and he had U.S. Ambulance here in Douglas. But that man was absolutely amazing to me and to Mel. For us, where we had to go was a Christian environment and one of love and concern, because many times he would be here in the middle of the night, and we'd be going to Jacksonville, was the closest place to have Mel's feeding tube. He had a GJ tube, which was a tube that one part went into the gastric area that that I fed him water and his medicines. And then the other part of the tube went into the duodenum, which is into the duodenum, which is lower into the stomach area, and that is where he fed in a slow pace, like slow drip, because your intestines are small. It's not like your stomach, so if you feed at a fast rate, then you would, of course, usually have what they call a peg tube, and it goes directly into the gastric. Because Mel was aspirating, they had to put it lower into the duodenum, and then that's a very, very long, slow process. It was a very intense requirement to stay on top of everything, and to watch it happen, and to realize that, if we had doctors that maybe were more aware of what was going on, that maybe we could have arrested it, and he would have never gotten to that point. But I have a real good friend now that's fighting that. She took a flu shot, and within 6 months they did catch hers, but she's already progressed, to the wheelchair, and is already having difficulty in swallowing. So I've met a lot of people, Zen, that have had flu shots, and they're progressing like Mel did, and they were some of them caught it. Anybody that knows anything about, like I say, ALS, or even in taking what they call IVIG, which is intravenous. It's an immunoglobulin, so what they give. They're very hard on the kidneys. But sometimes if you can handle taking that, then you can usually grow the myelin sheath. I think they said for every 6 months you can grow an inch of myelin sheath back. So in Mill's case, it was taken longer than he could have ever lived to have ever tried to replace that back. And then most times your kidneys won't hold up to continue to take it that length of time. So it was a battle, that was ongoing. And, I never gave up hope that there would be some great possibility of stem cell research coming up with something that might replace the myelin sheath faster. There were some things that they took some fetal tissue and they got it to grow pretty fast. I mean, down the road there could be some things for people who are fighting right now that might be available to them. But, I really wanted Bill to survive it. And I'm thankful.
Hold on, Dr. Joy.
He lived as long as he did.
Hold on, everyone. We'll be right back. For as the body is one, and hath many members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. Dr. Joy, I want to just turn it back over to you and give you a chance to speak wherever your heart leads, and whenever we can go into with the Parables of Joy, your latest release. I was very glad and happy that you were able to also share that with Mel, and to share that memory together with regard to your latest and upcoming publication, the one that we just released a couple days ago, which I will put a link in the chat room for those that are interested, and whenever you feel comfortable, we can speak about that as well.
Well, I just want to finish up where I was at a while ago, just to tell people
please.
that if you ever take a vaccination and you present with some weird thing of not feeling right, of dropping stuff, of falling, that you need to get to a doctor and you need to demand, if you've had a flu shot, you demand a spinal tap, because the spinal tap will tell them that those proteins are in your spinal column, and they'll know that you've got Guillain-Barre syndrome. And it's one of those things where if it's severe, it can take your life. And I know several people who took the flu shot and who died. In other words, where Mill was athletic, he didn't end up on the vent, but most people who get that GBS after a flu shot do end up on the vent, and many of them die. And I do know that of 3 people in our area who died after it. And then I've had other people who got Bell's palsy from it. And then, like I said, I have other friends who are progressing like Mill in the slow process of the myelin sheath being stripped, and their bodies are doing like an ALS patient. So I guess I just want to encourage people that are listening that if you do take a flu shot and you feel that something's not right, that you need to go to the doctor. At the time, I had no knowledge that a flu shot could cause you to have neurological damage. I had never heard that was even a possibility. My worry in Mill taking the shot that day was that I didn't want him to get sick like with the flu-like symptoms that I had, and kept me so sick and almost lost that quarter of college. If I had had any inkling that it would cause anything neurological, I would have never, ever, 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 ever let him take that flu shot. I'd have probably punched the doctor in the nose and walked down the hall. I mean, it would have been a whole different ball game. But our government doesn't tell us about the people like Mill because they don't want an epidemic, and then they want you to, not fight against the vaccination program. And like I say, even in my books, I've talked about this, that the World Health Organization, Bill Gates, the people who seem to have a hand in the money-making process tend to also have an understanding about, how this flu moves around in our world. And sometimes, like I've mentioned in my books, that you kind of go, is somebody creating a chaotic situation and then making money off of trying to think or make people think they're fixing it. And I know a couple of years back, before, one of my best friends that actually wrote the foreword to my Beguile series, Miss Francis, that lived out in Louisiana, she was in an elderly facility, and everybody there was, encouraged to take the flu shot. And of course, she knew about Mill and would not take it. And
Awesome.
everybody in that facility came down with the flu that took the flu shot, and she did not take it, and she did not get the flu. So it's one of those things where, I hate to say it. I mean, anybody that knows about the Guidestones up in
Right.
Elberton that talk about reducing the population and the New World Order and the hope of reducing population and the survival of the fittest, you just get an understanding that the Rockefeller Foundation has been doing this a long time, and like I mentioned in some of my books in regard to Hitler, they were looking to get rid of, and back in Hitler's day, and Rockefeller was involved in it, and in my updated Eden book, I'm going to go into some details about that, because I want people to know that this process began with Hitler trying it out.
Mm-hmm.
He got rid of people who had mental health problems. He got rid of people who had mental retardation problems. He got rid of certain races, which I talk about in all of my books, being the pure Hebrew race.
Right.
So,
Political dissidents.
All this that's right. Anybody that they wanted to target, they went after in the name of science. And now we're seeing the same thing happen, because Planned Parenthood, your DNR directives in the hospital,
right,
to do not resuscitate, all these kinds of things were set up to get rid of people. It's like euthanasia. It gives them the right for euthanasia. And I can remember the first time I heard the word euthanasia was when I was in the 8th grade. And I can remember them talking about that they were doing that in places like China and places like that. And I'm like, man, I hope to goodness that never happens in our country. I don't want anybody to take my mama or my grandmother under circumstances like that. And then I remember the first time that, people were put on ventilators. And the old-timey ventilators, most of the time when they put somebody on that, it was because they were already essentially brain dead, had been in a, either had a stroke or some kind of weird thing. And so then these DNR directives started being pushed, on people. Well, you don't want to end up on a respirator and not have any brain activity. So people rushed down, and they didn't want to have to do that, and didn't want family members to have to make the determination: do you take them off or keep them on? And that became a real push. But the problem is now they want everybody going in the hospital to be on DNR, and it's not the same as it was back then, because there are things like BiPAP machines and stuff like that if you have pneumonia or bronchitis or whatever, they can put you on, let your body rest. And once you're rested, you can be back normal again. But there are people who've got DNRs that they put on that stuff like that, and I hate to say, I saw firsthand. They wouldn't go in there and see about them. They quit giving them the medicines that they needed. They wouldn't let certain people bathe them. And I saw people not even be bathed because they had the attitude, well, they're going to die anyway. They've got a DNR. And that's not what the original, directive of DNR was all about. So you better be real careful about signing over something like that and not having somebody who's watching what are they doing when you go in there. Because I know, for example, Mill, he ended up on a respirator, and he was probably one of the few people that they would have ever said would have been able to come off, and he came off with no problem. So I'm like, there's something not right about it all, and I've seen it firsthand. And I've even told people, like, if I wish I could get Donald Trump and go, look, I can tell you where the problems are at, and these are the places you need to be looking about what's going on in our country and the games that are being played. But Zen, when you lose Christianity, when you lose the Christian concern for people and life in itself, then you start seeing things like the Dr. Kevorkian. And it's not a problem if somebody chooses to do that. But just for example, this little kid that just lost his life, Elfie, that was over in England, I believe that you should have the right to choose to live. And
Yeah,
whatever's
absolutely.
available, you should have the right for it. No different than if you choose a DNR because you don't want to live, or if you choose Dr. Kevorkian to kill you, whatever. Everybody should have a right to choose the way they want, but you should never be ostracized because you choose the right to live.
Right.
And you choose to have I have a real problem that society, if you're a have-not and you're in the way, they just want you out of the way.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Joy, I've been involved with advocacy for people with disabilities ever since I transitioned into this world. And one of the areas of study that I've looked at and examined are um, the living wills. And what people don't realize is that the living wills were created by the euthanasia groups as a way
Right.
to prevent heroic measures, which simply are feeding tubes, ventilators, even antibodies are
right.
considered heroic measures. And when you have a living will and not a durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions, they can even starve and dehydrate you to death, which is what
And I
they
saw
did
that
to,
happen. I saw
right,
that
to
happen
Terry
firsthand.
Schiavo. Yeah,
I saw that
it
happen.
happens in every hospital and every hospice across America. We don't realize to how pervasive it is, but ever since they killed Terry Schiavo so many years ago now,
Yes.
that was the green light for them to go ahead and implement that as protocol for treating people with disabilities and the elderly. And so
Yes.
this is the kind of thing that, and especially with for-profit healthcare institutions, and because this thing is now okayed and established as protocol, they do things even like the young people that come in. The other aspect of it is the organ harvestation, that they lie to families in order to get the organs of
The
young
organs.
people,
That's right.
right, in car accidents or whatever, and that they actually benefit. They make millions of
Money.
dollars
Big
off
money.
of delving out the organs of one person, and
Yes.
it's a very sick and twisted, as far as world. And what another thing that people don't realize is that they will put you into a coma and then declare you brain dead, or what they call non-heart beating death, which are both made up diagnoses, because there's when your body dies, your organs deteriorate and they are no good for the organ harvestation trade. And so they have to lie and trick your family into saying that you're already dead, brain dead, or persistent vegetative state, or whatever, and then what actually kills you is them taking your organs from you. And they don't tell you that. And those of you that are organ donors that have gone to the driver's license bureau and thinking that organ donation is a good thing to do, well, you are really putting your life at risk, especially you young people out there. But these are again are things that they do not tell you, Dr. Joy.
And that worries me, Zen. You and I understand that. I
Right.
understand it firsthand because I saw it. I mean, I'm not talking from just hearing it. I've seen this firsthand,
Yeah.
and it would just.
Oh, so have I.
The bad thing is this. I had doctors who I had taken my husband to for years. They always got paid, got good money for whatever they did. They, never owed a dime to anybody about, servicing him. But when I would not allow them to pull the plug on him, when I would not allow them to push us out of the hospital before he was ready to go, I actually had doctors who sent me ugly letters and terminated us from their practices.
Gosh, how horrible.
And because I'm standing up for what's right.
Right, you're standing up for life and your husband.
And I tell you, to this day, all I can say to those doctors who did that, who would not come and do palliative care on him, and who terminated us from a service in our community like that, God's going to deal with you.
Absolutely.
God is going to deal with you because what you did was absolutely ungodly, especially to the point of your oath and your care.
Yes.
You cannot, in my opinion, looking back over the course of years of knowing doctors and seeing how people had such compassion, and then to walk in and have to deal with these doctors who had those kinds of attitudes, and like you say, they had that attitude. DNR, like you say, if you don't have somebody in there watching,
Right.
and it's terrible. They'll let you lay there and never give you your medicine, never come in there and check you, never wash you, nothing.
Right.
And it's happening, like you say, it's happening all over this country. And like I say, with Mel being so sick, I was in a lot of hospitals. Last year we spent 200 days in hospitals. So I've seen it in the big hospitals. I've seen it in the little hospitals.
Right.
I saw it firsthand. I mean, I've got documented proof of days and times. I'd give anything to have a front row seat with Trump and say, let me just tell you
Right.
about what's happening in this country and how the healthcare industry is involved in this, and how the doctors and the nurses, the hospitals are being directed, through these organizations like you're talking about, to force these issues on people without you really understand. And they're not telling everybody the truth about it. Like you said, it's like they're beguiling you into believing it's the best thing. And it's totally satanic. I mean, I literally was scared to close my eyes. People would say, Joy, go home and get some rest. We got this. He's in ICU. Do you know I never left my husband unless I had somebody that I totally trusted that was working for me or a best friend sitting in that room watching. Now, that's how bad it was.
Yes,
I
it's horrible.
literally lived in those hospitals because I did not trust their ability to look after my husband. And I'm going to tell you something, that is sad. If you've got loved ones, you better not drop them off at the hospital and leave them there.
Right. Right, absolutely. Or nursing homes, or, it is horrible. It is absolutely.
Well, it's just like the latest thing with that poor woman that was in the nursing home, and it was the scabies that literally killed her from the inside out, and you could look at her skin and know that she was infected, and they've let her lay there and die with parasites.
Right.
And now, it's kind of like when I worked with handicapped people all those years. If I had a handicapped person come in and they were not looking right, acting right, I literally was watching them, watching how they acted, were they clean, were whatever. Now, that tells me if a person was in a nursing home and they were being eat out by scabies or whatever, you physically can see the deterioration of the body.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, the majority of nighttime people who are working in these places, they're too busy on their cell phones. I can remember sitting, trying to get somebody in because my husband was in severe pain, okay? I would keep waiting and waiting and waiting, get up and go out to try to find somebody, and they all be at the nurse's station laughing and cutting the fool, and what would they be on? Those cell phones.
Cell phones, right.
And I'm thinking to myself, you're in an ICU. Everybody in this whole place is either dying or close to death, and you're laughing and cutting the fool and not even paying attention that somebody's needing assistance. And most of the people laying in there couldn't even mash the buttons to say help. So if you didn't go in the room to them, they were just laying in there dying.
Right.
Like I say, the things that I saw, and I saw people run to watch monitors when people were being resuscitated, and then when they didn't make it, see people do high fives. I saw some of the most tragic, terrible things that to the point that I literally couldn't sleep at night. I would wake up just sweated down, thinking, "Are we in those places?" Because I'd be praying to God so hard, "Please just get us out of here." And so many times God came through, and He delivered. But I would watch people dying on left and right. I'm talking about sometimes in a day's time, I'd see 4 or 5 people die where we were at. And then see attitudes like it didn't even bother them. It didn't even faze them.
Good riddance.
It was like that.
Yeah.
It was literally like that. And I'm not telling a story. I'm telling the truth, and I hope I get the chance to really tell the truth about this because it was so bad. It was literally so bad. And, those people had family members that if they weren't able to come see about them, which is tragic, But the people that I think about is somebody that didn't have nobody, and
Right.
we're in the hands of that with
Right.
nobody watching. Nobody watching.
Yes.
And then it's really scary when you see this euthanasia becoming so prominent that if you don't follow their, rule to die like that, then you are ostracized to the point that they want to just make you into a jerk, and they treat you like a jerk. They don't treat
Right.
you with kindness. They don't treat you with compassion. You're doing opposite of what they are demanding that you do. And so many times, I just, all I can say is my daddy was one thing that he taught me, not to ever be a quitter. And I've been through a lot of things, and I think that when people read my book, Parables of Joy on a Georgia Farm, and we were going to talk about this, I think this is a good place for us to go into this. When I sat down to write Parables of Joy on a Georgia Farm, I wanted people to know about me. Because many times when an author comes out with work and you don't really know anything about them, you don't know, or, are they just saying stuff to be saying stuff? Have they really experienced tragedy in their life? Have they really understood what it's like to really have to dig down deep and push through in terrible situations and be able to make the best of situations? I think the Parables of Joy, and the reason I named it Parables, because it's true little stories. Kind of like when Christ, when he would try to explain a concept to somebody, he would tell you a story. He'd tell you about the rich man and Lazarus and what happened, or he would tell you about the fig tree or whatever. He had a story that you could relate to. So Parables of Joy on a Georgia Farm is really things that happened to me living and growing up on a South Georgia farm. And it is meant to take you deeper than just the story. I take you, if you will read the story and really listen to what I'm telling you and see what happened and how it became a stepping stone, as bad as some things were in my life, you'll understand how to survive serious things. And I think that the things that I went through as a child, as a young person, helped me deal with some of the worst situations that one can even imagine. I never minded looking after him, and there were many days and nights that I went for weeks on end that I never slept, and I know that God gave me the capability to do that. Times that I never took a bath for weeks on end, brushed my teeth, things like that. I literally could sustain under the most critical situations. And I will always know that what I went through and what I've told about in this Parables of Joy on a Georgia Farm helped me be what I became. And sometimes looking back, those stories were tragic. Those stories were tough. Those stories were things that, yes, might have made me happy at one moment, sad at another, and I try to include both. But at the same time, the stories in there that are happy, they have the reason that they're there is to teach you something about that happiness, just as the stories that are there that talk about tragedy teach you something about tragedy and how to overcome that tragedy. And, with everything that was going on with me losing my publisher and having to try to redo the Beguile series, which had just come out, and my first book, Antichrist, the Clone Image of Jesus Christ, the fact that it was really a bestseller on Armageddon Books for so many years, I wanted to get those books done and back out to the public, and it was really tough because Mel was so sick. And I am so thankful that Sacred Word Publishing was willing to do this. Eden to Armageddon Volume 1, 2, and 3 are all 2017 updated editions. And then the Antichrist, the Clone Image of Jesus Christ, is also a 2017. Then when I sat down to do the parables, then I was right in the middle of, Mel had just gotten a tracheotomy, and I thought I had proofread the book. I go back and I thought I had proofread it. And then I was working on another dealing with handicapped people and the work that I did with the Special Olympics and seeing the capability of very, very, very serious handicapping situations and how those people can rise above their handicaps. So I had finished that book up and was a paragraph away from sending it. My computer, my brand new computer, lost my entire book that I had been working on while Mel was so sick. I mean, I had worked on it with cramped in chairs that you can't imagine that you couldn't even sleep in. And I would be trying to work on computers that are burned up, could not find that. And when they found it, it was encrypted in code, and they couldn't ever bring it back. So I lost an entire book during all this as well, an entire book of probably a year of work on. That was devastating enough. But when I picked up the Parables of Joy on a Georgia Farm to read it, because I hadn't had a chance, then I realized it had not been proven.
Hold on, Dr. Joy. We'll be right back, everyone, for the second hour. Welcome, friends. I am your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio, and I'm honored to have as special guest with me this evening, Dr. Joye Pugh. Dr. Joy, if you would, please continue.
Well, where I left off was that I had picked up the book, Parables of Joy, to really read after it had been published, and I realized that I had not really gone back and proofread it like I should have. And so I had a lot of things happen. I mean, I lost my publisher, all my books. I didn't, like I say, they were on Amazon for $1,000, and lost my music stuff, and then of course Mel was getting sicker and had to have a tracheotomy. And at the time, I thought that this Parables was ready to go. And it's like I told you, Zen, there was a reason it had to be done the way it was, because if I had to work on it, I would have never gotten it finished before he passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted Mel to see this book, because so many times he and I would be riding along the highway, and I'd go, "Hey, did I ever tell you about the time so-and-so, happened?" And he would enjoy hearing about whatever happened. But in the Parables of Joy, the very last story that is in this book is called A Snowbird's Southern Belle. And it's about he and I and how we met. And I wanted him to hear this story. And I read it to him. And, there was a happiness and a moment to know that the story about us was, had been published. It became the eulogy that I did at Mel's funeral.
Oh,
so
wow.
For the people who are listening that are from the area and who did attend Mel's funeral, I've had many people come to me and talk about the eulogy that I gave. You will laugh, you will cry, you will find out things about me that, are funny, that are sad, that are tragic. But at the same time, my hope is in sharing it that you can relate to it in your own life, and that you can find the golden nuggets that have made you who you are. Mm-hmm. By looking at the own little parables, the stories in your own life. And so I hope that people, any age person, will enjoy. Anybody that can read as a young person on up to, an elderly person, I think will enjoy it. And if anything, there's history there that takes you back to the old South, done it all, driving tractor. If you have any desire to know about what life was like in the the late 1950s into the early 1960s and 70s, this book will really take you to those moments. And so, like I say, I hope that people will purchase this book, because it's a whole different concept behind, my research and why things have driven me to want to know more about life and the world and why we're here, and how God came into my life and why I am the way I am and believe the way that I believe. People who have read my research and who are listening tonight, to please get a copy of that and share it with your loved ones, because I do think it's that kind of book of hope in a world where there's going to be bad things, and if you live long enough, you're going to have the tragedies, and some tragedies that if you kind of have somebody else that you know has been through something, it kind of gives you hope when you do have tragedy that you can pick it up. Kind of like I pick up the book of Job, and many times when I was going through what I went through, I read the book of Job many times, over and over again, and it gave me scripture to start off with in each one of the parables, so that you can, gain knowledge and understanding and comfort. It'll be interesting. I hope people will read it, and I hope that they'll respond and send me emails in regard to the stories if they might relate to them or have had something similar happen, because I think it makes for a nice conversation. Want to encourage one another in the days that we're heading into, and I think that from our research then, we know the days are not going to get better.
Right.
The days are going to get worse.
Worse, exactly.
So in comforting people, giving you hope, and giving you the understanding that many people will think, well, Dr. Joy has just had a wonderful, wonderful life. This kind of gives you the perspective of where I've had to go to get to where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And it has not been a pretty climb, and many times it's been a very painful climb. And even, like I say, even writing the Beguile series, Mel was already sick. In 2013 was when he had to have the feeding tube placed in. I mean, there was just terrible times when I actually did my my CD Before Time Stops. That was in 2010, and I was supposed to be starting out doing concerts, and already had several concerts lined up. They did the surgery on his neck and spine, and it was not successful, and they still did not know at that point in time that, in about a year and a half, I lost about everything that was me, and I can't thank you enough for picking me up and dusting me off a little bit, Zen, and giving me some hope with all the research that I had done to get those 2017 editions back out to the public. And like I say, the Beguile series, Eden Armageddon, Volume 1, 2, and 3, and the Antichrist, my first book, The Cloned Image of Jesus Christ. You've already got those books available at Sacred Word Publishing, and I encourage people not to try to go to Amazon and pay $1,000 for a book.
Yes.
Because these new books that are out, the 2017 editions, are more updated, and they're regular price like they're supposed to be.
Right.
So we have them, they're in soft cover and they're in hardback, and then of course the Parables of Joy is brand new, and I have got a bunch of emails of people wanting the Eden book, and I will say tonight that I am 2 chapters away from having that completed.
Awesome.
So hopefully within the next week I can get that on, and then the Eden book will be a 2018 edition, upgraded. And of course now we changed for people that don't know, we changed the covers.
Covers, yes.
For these books. They're not the original covers, and the reason I didn't use the original covers because you couldn't tell the difference between the old ones and the new ones, and so.
Right.
Please pay attention that when you're looking at these, that the second editions and the 2017 editions have a different, cover on them than the old ones. And the Eden book will have a different cover than the original Eden book, just to be able to separate out so that you know if you're getting an updated edition or if you're having to purchase or you're purchasing an old edition that's no longer available. But I encourage people to keep checking the website and your Sacred Word Publishing website to see when on Amazon.com it hit number 1 many times and stayed in the top 10 for weeks on end. So that's a really big book. It's chock full of information, and so I'm excited that will be coming out real soon. And then I want to go back and try to get back into doing the Special Parables book, because I feel like there are many people who have family members who have mental retardation or who have disabilities that they're very limited in what their capability is, that would give you hope in knowing of true stories of people who overcame very serious odds and were able to soar. And so I do want that. I want to have time to get that book out. even though I lost it, I'm hoping that I can remember some of the greatness in that book to be able to bring it, back and be able to get it published. And then, of course, I am very interested in trying to continue my research on the pineal gland. I get, oh gosh, if I don't get an email every day from somebody around the world in regard to the YouTubes and things that we've done together, then in regard to that, the pineal gland and how it's manipulated, probably expound on that in my next research, because I feel like that's Satan's final frontier, that your pineal gland is it's an area that it's been kept kind of quiet, and at the same time plays a huge role in controlling you biologically from a distance, remote control-wise. And I think that the more we see, like, for example, children killing kids in schools, and they can sit and say that the guns are a problem. Guns don't have any problem with what's going on. If they don't have a gun, they'll find another way. And there's plenty of ways to use fertilizer and nails and whatever else. If you have a mind that's being controlled like a Manchurian candidate, where you don't have the ability to biologically control yourself, then anybody can get you to do anything under certain situations. And I know we did a show one time where I talked about watching somebody be put under and literally be told under hypnosis that when a person walks in a room, there's a squirt gun in the top of the cabinet, and when they come in, we want you to go get that squirt gun, and we want you to squirt them with it. And in your mind, when they bring you out of that, when whoever walks through the door, you're going to walk to that little area, pick up what you think is a squirt gun, and it can be a whatever kind of gun, and you're going to blow them away. And in your mind, you didn't even realize that. And so most people don't understand that with being able to hypnotize, and that's really what you're doing when you're making a Manchurian candidate. And you can easily do it with a lot of the games, video games. And I know that Donald Trump has tried seriously to try to talk to these gamers and these people that make software for gaming in regard to this, and they keep saying, oh, no, it doesn't have anything to do with it. Well, yes, it does. And when you watch these things constantly and you don't blink, and you've got this constant either music, and it's making phantom beats in your head that I talk about that are binaural beats, and all that's going on, you are being programmed subliminally. And just like in when you're hypnotized, you can click just a finger, and it will set the person off. So, if you wanted to, let's say, set them up, and you just want to do a phone call, and you say, you're going to use a code word. Let's say you're going to use 4, and they pick up, and you say 4. You've got them set for whatever they're going to go do. And people don't get that, and of course, the powers that be kind of flash things in our faces. George Clooney did that show about the goat, a couple of years ago, movies. But that's a true story.
Yes,
he can remotely
absolutely.
control you because the pineal gland is like a transistor array. And I've been trying to tell this since, my Eden book came out years ago, that your mind is like a computer program. And this pineal gland is like a quartz. And like I say, in the Beguile series, especially the Volume 2, where I go into great detail about this, it can be remotely controlled at a distance and biologically control you. So the more that you open yourself up to playing these games or watching the crazy music or listen to crazy music or watching crazy things on TV, the more you open yourself up to those kinds of things, getting into a meditative state, doing, sitting in a cobra position, doing the thing, you are literally opening that gland up to be controlled. And once it gets locked in on you, biologically, you can't do a thing about it. And it's not that it's not real. It's very real. And even the Bible told us to be wary of these things because, for example, when Saul wanted to bring Samuel back up, he went to the witch of Endor, and she literally conjured him. And the Bible doesn't say it didn't happen. It says it did happen.
Right.
And you are not supposed to be doing that. And I know sometimes I get emails where people say, oh, but I do it in a Christian way. No. There is no Christian way to do there is no Christian way to sit in a cobra position, because you are literally bringing the serpent up your spine into your holy of holies and placing Satan on the mercy seat that your pineal gland is sitting in. And that is a tragedy when I see all over this country that they are doing meditative cobra positions around this country inside of churches. Do anything in a repetitious fashion. Because repetition is the same thing as brainwashing. It's the same thing as making a Manchurian candidate out of you. Mm-hmm. And I think that if people don't get that, I hope and pray that they'll read my Beguile series, because I think that I've got enough scientific proof in there to explain to you how it's being done, why it's being done, and why you need to stay as far away from it as you possibly can.
Right. Right. So many people are in this day and age, Dr. Joy, are just simply losing it. Whether it's from the vaccines, ADHD or OCD or whatever, and then the medications, the psychotropics, the prescription meth, Ritalin, Adderall, and then you have things like Paxil and these other psychotic drugs, and it is difficult for people to hold it together and even deal with life in a normal way. And it seems like, and because of that, so many people are open to suggestions, and when they do involve themselves with either the meditation or with doing tarot cards or playing with Ouija boards or anything like that, they have no idea as to what kind of doors they are opening and what kind of, even if they're doing it just for fun. Like, nowadays high schoolers are getting together with their friends at parties and going out on Friday nights and playing with Ouija boards, and they think that's, a good time. That's all fun and games. And they have no idea, and those kind of things will follow them and linger, and it's just and especially because so many now are just having difficulties in so many different ways, even dealing with normal stress, and then parents, and also parents, kids just having energy and wanting to play, and parents are like, sit down, watch TV, don't get up, all this kind of thing. And kids are naturally, they want to, they're active and they want to play and they want to do things, and so parents will suppress that and put their children on drugs just because they think that they're over hyper, and yet they're just being kids, and doctors will prescribe and are over medicating, and they get paid bonuses for medicating and getting people on these drugs for their lifetimes. And it's just, it's really sad where we are.
It is. And I have noticed that people's attention spans are non-existent.
Yes.
And children seem to be even worse.
Worse.
So it's telling me that I think that the vaccination program, you're getting some kids that are like Mill who have immediate results. It makes them autistic. They're ruined for life.
Right.
Then you get the ones that are ADD, bipolar, and just can't focus.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're getting the next group that even if you tell them and they can follow the directions, they can't think for themselves.
Right.
And a good example is if you go into, let's just say, to a fast food restaurant, and the cash register is not working, and they tell you, okay, it's $10.02, and you say, okay, well, I'm going to give you $11. They don't know how to count out 98 cents.
Right.
Because they don't have something. They're telling them now, I owe you 98 cents back.
Yes.
I have actually had people say, well, it's down. You just take the food.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm like, how about, I need to pay you something? Oh, no, it's down. Because they can't tell you.
Right. Wow.
And I've heard so many people who are dealing with kids right now, whether it be in athletics or whatever, they'll say they can't think. For example, if they're playing ball, and you showed them a play, let's say in basketball, they go down the court and you call a play, and then they're kind of like, okay, well, the ball's over here. They can't assimilate, well, if the ball's on that side, we need to run the play on that side. It's like I think everybody's being affected.
Yes,
I don't
agree.
think I just think that there's levels of it. I think that the medicines, like you're talking about, and the vaccine program that we're talking about, is actually dumbing people down. It's affecting some people, and it's real obvious, autistic-wise. Then the next group is kind of doing these little things which were strange, but yet they're functionable. But then that next group, I don't see them having. I'm like, here we have all this technology. We have so much at our fingertips. We know more than we've ever known. But yet, if you go out on the street, which has been done by that Waters guy on Fox many times, where he used to go out and say, "This is my world," and he would ask questions of people who were in what I would call the best colleges, probably being, no telling what their, tuition was to be in those colleges, and ask them, who's this a picture of? And they don't know that Mike Pence is our vice president, but yet they can tell you who was on the Late Show last night with Jimmy Fallon. It's like, what is going on?
Right.
What is being taught in these colleges? And if you're a liberal, it's okay that you can say whatever, but let a Christian conservative come in and, oh, my gosh, we're going to burn the place down. Something is amiss. And to me, there is brainwashing going on to the point when you see a family sit at a table and they've all got their cell phones and nobody's talking to one another, then that's detachment.
Yeah.
And what happens in detachment from a psychological standpoint, going back to my master's degree, if you take a child and you don't put it with the mother, the child will die. They have to have human contact, okay?
Right.
If you take a child and you remove it from the mother and put it with somebody that doesn't care about it, then you form a detachment, and that child it will more than likely never have affection and love like it should have had. So what we're seeing is our technology is detaching us from each other.
Right.
I can vouch and say, now they don't care if you die in the hospital. It doesn't matter because they're so detached they can't feel your pain or feel your suffering or really don't care because I'm too involved with my selfie.
Yes, right.
And what do we go back to many times that you and I have talked about? The spirit of Cain.
Right.
God, here's the creator, God, who came to Cain and said, where is your brother Abel? And what did Cain tell him? Am I my brother's keeper? Who cares? And he's telling that to the creator.
Yes.
And I'm telling you that what we're seeing right now through this detachment is selfish Cainness. I'm too busy playing on my Facebook phone, taking my beautiful face now and putting it out there so everybody can see instead of doing my job.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't really care that Mr. So-and-so's in there because he's got a DNR. He's going to die anyway because I'm too busy taking my picture right now. That is the spirit of Cain.
Right.
And it is eating this world alive.
Yes, absolutely. Hold on, Dr. Joy. We'll be right back for final episode. All right. Welcome back, everybody, for final segment. Dr. Joy, I want to ask you about how you see and what you think about the chemtrails and whether they are impacting and affecting people as well. Because what I've noticed is that it seems every time right before the storms and the rains are about to come in, they will spray and there will be heavy, heavy lines all across the skies. And in my opinion, I noticed that afterwards, people that are out in the rain, they tend to get sinus infections or have breathing complications or, are generally just getting sick from having low immunities. And so, what's your thought on this?
Oh, I think there's a whole reason behind that. I agree that there's definitely proof that we are being sprayed. I bring that up in my Beguile series about all that went down with all the problems down in the Gulf of Mexico when the oil spills and whatever, and they caught those planes flying and doing a bunch of stuff down there. Our oceans are suffering from something a lot very serious. Today, it's making people sick, and what does it do when you do this? It causes a problem with your ability to breathe, and then what do? You run down and you buy your pharmaceuticals, and you get your Flonase and all those kind of drugs like that, which absolutely destroy your immune system. Because when you take something and you don't learn to let your body fight it off and build an immunity to it, then you are allowing your body to become subjected to a pharmaceutical thing, which is not, within your own body. Anytime you take medicine, that's a foreign thing coming into your body that your liver has got to process. And it just seems like the filtration system of the liver is being affected by a lot of drugs. In fact, you can turn on the TV and they'll be, advertising these drugs. And what just gets me is they'll show people laughing and carrying on and partying, and you're so busy watching the good things, you're not listening to that this drug can cause this and this and this and this and this. And one day I was sitting there and I was thinking for 5 minutes it kept telling you what was wrong while they were laughing and carrying on. And I thought, well, if you were depressed before you started taking that, you're going to be dead by the time you take it.
Right.
You've got to pay attention. When you go to the doctor, it's just their thing to listen to these drug reps, and the newest thing out, they're going to put you on it. And sometimes people have suffered greatly because it was the new best thing, and nobody had tried it out yet. Just like Tylenol used to be the big push, get away from aspirin, go to Tylenol, and then they found out that Tylenol absolutely kill you quicker than an aspirin because once you take too much Tylenol, you can't pump your stomach out. It literally destroys your liver. It destroys it. And once that filtration system in your body is destroyed, then you can't get rid of toxins. And then what does toxins do? It affects the DNA. And what does the DNA have about? If it gets mutated, then it turns into cancer. So I fully believe that Tylenol actually caused my mother to have cancer because she was given high doses of it for a rheumatoid problem. And then nobody was checking her liver enzymes, and they got so high, and then she presented with colon cancer. They had metastasized and gone over her body, and took like 9.5 years of chemo. And I took care of her, and I saw it firsthand with when I would go and be with her while she was taking chemo. The people that I would be like, how is it that young people, old people, fat people, skinny people, different races have all got this problem? Well, it's got to be something that everybody's being subjected to. It can't be something out there that's so minute that it's not getting to everybody. But something, let's just say as simple as Tylenol, you start giving to children when they're, people give it to them when they're born. And then you take that throughout the course of your life. If your liver is not functioning correctly and somebody's not checking your liver enzymes, then your body is building up toxins within it.
Yes.
And anytime you have the toxins building up in your body, then, of course, it's going to mutate the DNA. And when you mutate DNA, it's going to turn into a cancerous, some kind of tumor. And if you think about it, something that simple could be behind the whole process. And I remember I used to try to do research because I would ask people all the time when I would go in with my mother. The first thing I'd ask them is, do you take Tylenol? Because I kept thinking there's something so tiny, so unusual that a lot of people can get their hands on, and a lot of people take a lot of it. And that was one thing that a lot of people take a lot of, because at the time, people weren't told that you better be careful about that drug. It was like it's better than aspirin, because aspirin was supposed to, you could eat a hole in your stomach or whatever. And the same thing when we used to eat butter. When I grew up on the farm, we had a cow. We milked the cow. We made our butter. And then all of a sudden they came out with Crisco. Well, you can put a can of Crisco in a cabinet for 30 years and open it up. 30 years later, it won't even have any kind of mildew,
mold,
or fungus or mold, nothing growing on it. And what happens is when it gets in your body, it literally shuts down and plugs your arteries up. And so when people they were trying to say, oh, well, we're getting away from this. You got to use margarine. You got to use whatever. Well, they finally did a study. They found out the people that were eating their old-timey butter and the fat off of, the hog or whatever were not suffering like the people who were eating the Crisco.
Right.
And then they tried to cover all that up. It's kind of like when they went to saccharin, and they tried to say, well, saccharin was causing cancer. Well, that was a experiment we did in college. You would have had to give that rat so much saccharin that he'd have died from having so much saccharin. I mean, it's bound to do something at the level they were giving it. But then they came out and did things like Splenda, and then you don't realize that it affects the neurons firing in your brain because it's messing with the hormones that protect your brain. So, yes,
aspartame.
There is an ongoing, and I'm telling you, the pharmaceutical industry was started by the Rockefellers. The people that that funded Hitler was the Rockefellers. The people that started this, right to die,
medical colleges, all that.
Was the Rockefellers.
Society. Right.
So it all goes back when you do the research and really look at where do we go from just simple stuff like eating milk and eating eggs and the good things, but now it's so busy in putting something in it. So now the people that were trying to do it right, now our fruit, for example, doesn't have seeds, and I mentioned this in my book.
Right, yes.
They're Frankenstein seeds. In other words, they don't reproduce so that they can patent the seed, but at the same time, you're not eating something that God made. He didn't make it like that. So it's been changed. And anytime you genetically modify anything and put it in your body, your organs are not functioning and getting rid of the toxins that those simple things may have in them. That long time ago, we didn't have all those preservatives and all these things. And, a prime example of something that I can't eat is monosodium glutamate, and it's in everything.
Yes,
and
oh my goodness.
It's a flavor enhancer.
Right,
In other words, the stuff you're eating really tastes like cardboard. But what they do is they put those flavor enhancers in there so that you'll keep eating it. Like you get a potato chip and you go, I can't eat but one. Yes, right. Because that flavor enhancer is like a drug.
Yes,
People
totally.
who couldn't understand years ago why they couldn't quit drinking Coca-Cola. Well, it's full of caffeine. In fact, Coca-Cola was designed to be a cough medicine when it first came out. It was literally sold as cough medicine. And it had the real stuff in it. It had it had cocaine in it. And then it was just okay. We when you do the research and you realize that we have been manipulated for people making money.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the same thing with our electricity. I talk about that in the book that'll be coming out, Eden, that's been redone in the Tesla thing. Free energy. Well, that wasn't going to go down too good. The Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan and them couldn't make money off electricity if we had it free. Okay? So they had to come up with a different kind of current so they can bill you every month for your $300 light bill.
Right, and Tesla ends up doing.
Yet there's free energy out there that people, if we didn't have to pay those kind of costs, you'd have free money to do other things and possibly not have poverty in the world. Those people don't care. They want to be the rich ones, and they want us to be the poor little commoners, and they control us and make money off of us. And so now, as we're getting
even
to
petroleum,
the end,
petroleum's a racket.
Yes, it all is. You just watch. Right now, when school gets out, all your gas prices are going to go up.
Right.
It's a racket.
It is.
And like I say, this, like you mentioned, these chemtrails and stuff, people having problems, they're making you sick. I mentioned something in my Beguile series that there is an agent that you can go in, like, for example, if a chicken house gets into like a bird flu, there's an agent that's made that is a foam, and you can fill the air up with that foam with those chickens.
Absolutely, I agree.
Lungs. And it would be very easy to do. You just gradually, just slowly, you're killing people. And it's like I've said all the time with a frog. You can take a frog and put him in a little bit of cold water, and then just gradually turn the oven on and just keep turning it up, and he'll sit right in that water till it absolutely boils him to death, and he won't even know it's doing it. And that's what's happening to all of us. Everywhere we turn, our food is messed up, our air is messed up, our water, our oceans are one big, bad mess. Mm-hmm. And when you see all these fish and all these birds dying all over the world, you know, I mentioned that in all my Beguile.
Mass die-offs.
The die-off is happening to people the same way. People around the world go, have you noticed how many young people are dying? Have you noticed how many people are trying to tell the newspapers or at the funeral homes not to list that people are dying in hospitals? In other words, they'll just say they died. They won't say like where they're dying at. But it's an amazing situation, and it's something that the Bible tells us. You know, there's going to be that wormwood that's going to hit us that's got to be out there that I mentioned in my Beguile series. You know, that I fully believe that the Vatican put that extra telescope out there in Arizona that they call Lucifer, that they're watching for this thing. And it says it's going to hit us. And then it's going to kill a third of this and a third of that, and it's going to make the waters bitter and that kind of stuff. Well, we're almost there. So if we were to get hit by something, it wouldn't take anything very big to finish us up. Mm-hmm. Because we're heading in that direction. I mean, that the Bible tells us, the Bible is 100% true. It's going to happen exactly like we've been told. We can see it every day coming to pass, man.
Right. Yes, Christ told us that, you know, as in the days of Noah, and in the Book of Giants that was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls, it speaks about the miscegenation of everything, animals, plants, that everything was totally corrupted. The DNA was twisted, and that's exactly where we are. He also said, unless the days be shortened, there should be no flesh left. And I fully believe that, you know, that's why he is Savior Messiah, and that's why it's going to take him coming in return, separating the harvest to save us from the insanity that has been unleashed here by the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness, and that things are just so crazy out of hand. Even the weather, you know, earthquakes and things like that, tsunamis, all of that is also being triggered by technologies and things that we just cannot fathom and wrap our minds around. Well, most people anyways. There are those that
just like, you know, this year in South Georgia, we had a huge snow. It was just a huge snow. I mean, things you don't ever see happening or happen. The hurricanes that came through here, the tornadoes that we have in South Georgia, things that, you know, we might have had it once in a blue moon, but not just back to back to back to back to back to back. And and it's all changing. It's all, nothing is like it was when I was a child. So, you know, in my 61 years here on this earth, I just, you know, it's just absolutely, you know, amazing because, of course, my grandparents were in, you know, the horse and buggy days. And so to see technology come to where we are, I mean, when I was a little girl, we didn't have a telephone in our house. And now we've got a phone that we can talk to anybody anywhere in the world and put anything that we want to know about in it, and it tell us whatever in seconds.
Right.
You know, so, you know, we actually did that as the days of Noah, and people have not watched that series that you and I did. I think that's a good series that we did to try to explain that we are living in what were like the days of Noah, and that's what the Bible promises when we get to that point again, like you're talking about, when things are so mixed and mingled and nothing is like it's supposed to be. That was the reason that God brought the flood
Yes.
To get rid of that stuff and even it back out and give us a chance again.
Right.
And actually bring Jesus, into the picture and save what he established, as far as humans are concerned.
Right.
And to save us that are, truly human. And
Right.
and like you say, to separate us up from the tares. And that's the thing that I think that series that we did, I think we get down to the very basics to make people understand that those tares live among us.
Right.
They look like us, but they are not of us, and they're from that lineage of Cain.
Yes, yes.
And the only thing that they're here for is to take our souls. They don't care about us. They know they're going to go straight to hell, and they're going to take everybody that they can take with them.
As many as they can, absolutely. Yep.
So it's important for people to really realize that we fight not against flesh and blood. We're fighting against principalities in some very high places, and we can't see it. If our eyes could be open to the spiritual world, we would be amazed at what's going on all around us, because everything you think, do, or say, something is trying to trip you up and make you fall on your face so that you either give up, give in, or turn to something like drugs or whatever to handle your problem with instead of standing strong and believing. It's hard when things are going tough, and I've been there. Boy, I've been there in some nights when my husband would be so sick I would be just on the floor crying and trying to get through the night. It's tough when you have to reach out to a God that is listening but sometimes is silent. Because our gratification is not get through this, and we are living in a fallen world.
Yes.
Everything around us is deteriorating. There's nothing that is sitting here not deteriorating. And the only way to get to the point of perfection is to get back to the garden. And the only way you're going to get back to the garden is to do it the right way. And you got to follow the right person.
Absolutely.
And you can't give in, and you cannot give up.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do. But I hope that when people read my parables book and when they listen to this show tonight, that they can understand that, yes, you can be carried to the depths of hell. I said I felt like I was Job's sister.
Right.
Because I feel like that I've gone through where my friends turned, they wouldn't support, I've had, doctors do us in. I lost my publisher. I lost all my work. I got to the point that I was like Job. And physically I had some issues, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, do I just give up? But it teaches you, like Job, stay strong.
Right. Perseverance.
In the end, we win. And I have a song about that. In the end, we win. But you got to get through this fallen world. And when God comes after us in a catching away, or he takes you in death, you want to go to be with him. Because I'm going to tell you something. I don't want to end up with these cats that are destroying this world right here. Because if we think it's bad here, it's kind of like a sign I saw one time in Jacksonville, Florida, and it said, if you think it's hot here, it's a sign of God. I thought to myself, that was a perfect sign for a Florida state, the state of Florida to have up. Because, it gets really hot in Florida. But, if you think it's hot here, can you only imagine your worst day here, how much worse it's going to be if you end up in hell?
Right.
And it's forever and ever. And it's not lights out, and I proved that in my research. Don't read it. If you don't believe me, read my research, because I proved that anything that's ever made thermodynamically can never be destroyed. It can be put back together and burn again, and put back together and burn again. So you literally can never be destroyed. And if you end up in hell, it's going to be over and over and over and over. It's non-ending torture.
Why even risk it? Why even take the chance? I just can't understand that because the world is so
many times we haven't been taught in our schools or in our Sunday schools or in our churches how serious this matter is.
Yes. No judgment, as far as no repercussions to our behaviors, actions, and they want us to believe that there's no repercussions.
That's right. And right now, even the Pope says, well, it doesn't matter, what religion you are. God loves everybody. God is a loving God. Well, my opinion, if you think that Jehovah is a loving God, you need to read the book of Leviticus. Every time I read that book, I go, I would be dead. I would be dead. Thank goodness I didn't live during that time where I would be dead, because what he said, he meant.
Yes.
He loves us. It's true. God created us in his image. He loves us. But he tells you that if you don't do what I say do, then you don't love me back.
Right.
And I'm not going to have Satan and the rest of his group back in heaven with me when I gave them everything.
Exactly.
And they chose to not love me.
Right.
Even though I loved them, they didn't love me. So if you want to be like them, go be with them.
Right. Yes, because he hates tares. Right, absolutely. Especially with, all that, even what we are aware of what they are doing and perpetuating and propagating right now, they deserve that justice. They deserve that punishment. And so, yeah, absolutely. You reap what you sow. He teaches us.
Well, I just wish our churches were being a little bit more vibrant to teach people. And again, it goes back to even teaching about the fact of what really happened in the garden, because I think if people
most important thing,
how sex has been a part of this whole thing,
right,
that you would have a different feeling when you even dated somebody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Literally.
Yes.
That, a marriage or anything like that, because it is in the beginning. In the beginning, we were being told, and I hate to say it was not eating an apple. So I hope that we get to do another show and we can talk more about those kinds of things, because I think it's important for this generation to be awake. You can't be sleeping through this. You better be awake, or Satan has got something, somebody in your life to try to bring you down.
Yes. Dr. Joy, your website and whatever contact information you would like to share.
Again, you can go. My Facebook page is Joye Pugh, and then my website is www.drjoye, DRJOYE. And if you have to buy from Amazon, then you just make sure you look at what you're purchasing, because the newer updated 2017 and 2018 editions are so much better, and they're priced the way they're supposed to be priced.
Right.
And the royalties are given to the poor person like me that's trying to do the research, because those people making $1,000, I do not get a dime. I had a lady who was very upset about that the other day, and I was like, that's not me. And it is upsetting when I see stuff like that, because then people think it's me trying to sell a book like that. I wish I could make $1,000 off of a book then, wouldn't you? But that's
that'd be
not
nice.
me.
Right. Absolutely. And just so everybody knows, you can go right now. The hardback for Parables of Joy and the softback is available through lulu.com, or just go to sacredwordpublishing.com.net. And we will be releasing Eating very soon as Dr. Joy finishes up, and then whatever other books and titles. Final comment, Dr. Joy? We got about a minute and a half remaining.
Zen, thank you for being a blessing in my life. From the first day that I met you, when we did our first, YouTube thing together, it has been a blessing to have you in my life. And I thank you for being my brother in Christ, and I look forward to our future together and to more YouTubes and more fun radio shows.
Absolutely. And likewise, Dr. Joy, you've been a great blessing to my life as well, and I am honored to stand with you in truth and in service to the kingdom in the manner that our King and Lord exampled to us. And so I'm also looking forward to continued work and further discourse.
Thank you again for having me on tonight and letting me explain as to what's been going on in my life.
It was our pleasure, Dr. Joy. We'll do it again soon. God bless all. Good night.